I never thought love could decay while you were still living inside it. Decay isn't dramatic. It doesn't come with thunderclaps or police sirens or a single screaming fight that ends everything. It creeps in quietly, like damp rot in the walls of an old brownstone. First, you catch a faint sweetness, overripe fruit left too long on the counter. Then it turns cloying, heavy in the throat, then rancid. By the time the smell fills every room and you finally admit something is wrong, the entire structure is already compromised. The beams are soft, the foundation shifting, and you're still trying to live in it like nothing has changed. Sunny and I met in the spring of 2013 at Bookmark and Brew, a cramped, beloved independent bookstore cafe hybrid on 7th Avenue and Park Slope that went out of business during the second year of the pandemic. The place smelled perpetually of espresso grounds, old paper, and the faint vanilla of whatever candle the owner burned to cover the mildew in the back storage room. She was 20, working the register 3 afternoons a week to help pay for community college classes in graphic design she would never finish. I was 21, part-time, shelving returns, and pushing the same 5 Kurt Vonnegut paperbacks, Slaughterhouse-Five, Cat's Cradle, Breakfast of Champions, Mother Night, and God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater, to every customer who lingered too long in the fiction section or wore a band t-shirt ironically. She had this habit that drove the owner insane. She'd sneak behind the counter during slow shifts and re-alphabetize the graphic novel section not by author, last name, but by character name. Batman should come before Superman, she'd say with absolute conviction, sliding Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns ahead of anything by Alan Moore. It's just correct. Moral hierarchy matters more than chronology. I thought she was pretentious as hell. I also thought she was brilliant. The first time we worked a shift together, she caught me staring while she rearranged the Sandman volumes.
"What?" she asked, one eyebrow arched. "Nothing, just you're committing literary sacrilege. And you're committing aesthetic laziness by letting Grant Morrison sit next to Jeff Johns. Crime." We argued for 40 minutes about whether Watchmen belonged before or after V for Vendetta. By closing time, we were laughing. 6 weeks later, we were dating.
By Christmas 2013, we were spending every night in my narrow railroad apartment in Crown Heights. The place had one window that faced a brick wall, a kitchenette so small you could cook pasta while brushing your teeth, and a mattress on the floor because neither of us could afford a frame. We didn't care. We ducked with the urgency of people who had just discovered sex could be joyful instead of awkward. We talked about forever in that casual, half-joking way 20-somethings do, when forever still feels like something that happens to other people, movie characters, our parents' friends, strangers on the subway holding hands after 30 years. Sunny made ordinary days feel like small ceremonies. Breakfast wasn't just eggs. It was eggs scrambled with chives she snipped from the tiny windowsill herb garden she insisted on starting, even though the apartment got maybe 40 minutes of direct sun a day. She'd stand barefoot in one of my old t-shirts, stirring slowly, humming whatever song had been stuck in her head since 3 a.m., when she'd texted me lyrics because they reminded her of something I'd said weeks earlier. Weekends were long walks. We'd cross the Brooklyn Bridge at golden hour, coffee in one hand, her fingers laced through mine in the other. Tourists would take our picture without asking. She'd lean into me and whisper terrible tourist impressions in my ear until we were both shaking with silent laughter. She collected small rituals the way other people collect coins or vintage postcards, notes slipped into my coat pockets. "Don't forget to eat something green today, hippie." Polaroids, hidden in books I was reading. Us kissing on the F-train platform, time-stamped 2:17 a.m. Voicemails left when I was asleep just to say she missed the sound of my breathing. Holidays were her religion. Christmas 2013, our first together. We dragged a 7-foot Fraser for 6 blocks on the subway from a lot near Prospect Park. The tree shed needles the entire ride. By the time we got it up the 4 flights to my apartment, we looked like we'd rolled in pine tar. She had a box of ornaments she'd been accumulating since she was 8, glass balls painted by her mother, wooden soldiers her father carved, a lopsided star she made in 3rd grade out of popsicle sticks and glitter that still shed silver flecks every December. We strung lights until 2 a.m., drank cheap red wine, built a gingerbread house that collapsed twice because the royal icing was too thin. When it finally stood crooked and leaking caramel, she kissed me so hard my lips split. We tasted blood and sugar and laughed like idiots. Thanksgiving 2014, her first time hosting. She brined a turkey for 48 hours in a cooler on our tiny fire escape because the fridge was too small. 3 kinds of stuffing, cornbread with sausage, chestnut with herbs, wild rice with dried cranberries, because people deserve options. Gravy reduced until it clung to the spoon like varnish. My parents came up from Jersey, her aunt flew in from Ohio. The table was mismatched plates and thrift store candlesticks. She wore her mother's old apron, sleeves rolled, hair in a messy knot. When everyone was stuffed and half drunk, she stood to make a toast. "To family," she said, voice catching, "the one we're born into, and the one we choose." I caught her eye across the table. She winked. I fell in love with her all over again. Birthdays became scavenger hunts. For my 23rd she hid clues around Brooklyn, a Polaroid of the bench in Prospect Park where we'd had our first real kiss, under an oak tree during a sudden rain, taped under the seat, a coffee receipt from the place we went after our first fight. She'd stormed out over something stupid, I can't even remember what, and I'd followed her, apologizing, in the rain. A keychain shaped like the Brooklyn Bridge with a tiny note rolled inside. "Meet me where we said forever." I found her at the Dumbo waterfront at sunset, picnic blanket spread, bottle of Prosecco sweating in an ice bucket she'd stolen from work. She was wearing the red dress from our second date. We drank straight from the bottle and ducked behind a stack of shipping pallets while the Manhattan skyline glittered like it was showing off just for us. Anniversaries were weekend escapes planned with military precision, train tickets booked 6 months out, bed and breakfast reservations confirmed twice, playlists timed to the exact minute we'd arrive. Starting with "Such Great Heights," our first dance song at the imaginary wedding we joked about, and ending with Otis Redding's "Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay," because she said it sounded like the end of a perfect day. Valentine's Day was something else entirely. Valentine's was theater. February 14th, 2014, our first. She turned my 400-square-foot studio into a tunnel of paper hearts suspended on fishing line from the ceiling. Hundreds of them, cut from construction paper she'd stolen from the bookstore, each one with a memory written in her neat block print. The night you quoted Vonnegut while drunk, when you carried me piggyback across Court Street. First time I said I love you and you froze like a deer. She wore nothing but red satin ribbon wrapped around her torso like a present. She fed me chocolate-dipped strawberries she'd made in a borrowed double boiler from her roommate, giggling when the chocolate hardened too fast and cracked. Her skin tasted like cocoa and nervous laughter. We made love on the floor among fallen hearts until the ribbon came undone, and we were both laughing too hard to continue. The second Valentine's she rented a rooftop in Dumbo through a friend who managed the building. Fairy lights she'd borrowed from a nearby construction site, strung between HVAC units, a 8-gallon bottle of Prosecco, a Bluetooth speaker playing Slow Al Green until the battery died, "Let's stay together." We danced barefoot on cold tar paper, her head on my chest, city lights blurring below us. She whispered, "I want this forever." I believed her. By our engagement year, 2016, she'd saved for months to book a cabin in the Catskills, snow on the roof, hot tub under stars, wood smoke in the air. She wore black lace I'd never seen before, the kind that ties with satin ribbons. We drank bourbon by the fireplace. I proposed again, properly this time, ring I'd saved for in secret. She cried when I slipped it on her finger, as though I hadn't already asked 6 weeks earlier in a crowded diner on Flatbush. "Yes," she said, over and over, like she was convincing herself it was real. Our wedding was small, backyard of her aunt's place in Ditmas Park, 30 people max. She wore her mother's dress, ivory lace, altered because her mother had been gone since Sonny was 12. Ovarian cancer, aggressive, gone in 9 months. We danced barefoot on the grass to Otis Redding until the neighbors complained about the volume at 11 p.m. The honeymoon was a week in Montreal. Neither of us had passports yet, so Canada was as far as we could go without hassle. We ate poutine at 3 a.m. from a truck on Rue Sainte Catherine, grease dripping down our chins, promising each other we'd never stop being stupid in love. In 2018, we bought the house on Prospect Place from her father's estate. Her father died February 2017, sudden myocardial infarction at 59. No warning. He was found in the kitchen, coffee mug still warm, keys in hand like he'd been about to leave for work. Sonny inherited the brownstone outright. No siblings, no other heirs. We moved in that summer. Painted the walls dove gray because she said it felt calm. Planted hydrangeas in the narrow backyard, blue ones that turned pink when the soil changed. Turned the third floor into my office with a view over the rooftops toward Manhattan. We hung photos everywhere, us on the Brooklyn Bridge, her laughing in Montreal snow, our wedding kiss under string lights. It felt like a rival, like we'd finally caught up to the life we'd been promising each other since we were kids pretending to be adults. The first few years in the house were golden. We hosted dinner parties. Long tables, candles, too much wine. She still planned Valentine's like military operations. 2019, a private dining room at a tiny French place in Cobble Hill, chef's tasting menu, champagne sabered at the table. 20 tots. Lockdown forced us indoors, so she turned the living room into a Parisian bistro. Baguettes, brie, Edith Piaf on vinyl, her in a little black dress she'd bought online. We slow danced in socks on the rug until the record skipped. 2021, she surprised me with tickets to a rooftop screening of Casablanca at the Met, blankets, hot toddies, her head on my shoulder the whole time. 2022, a weekend in Hudson Valley, apple picking, bonfire, her reading poetry to me, under stars while I pretended I understood half of it. 2023, cooking together, oysters Rockefeller, steak au poivre, creme brulee she torched with a blowtorch she'd bought just for the occasion. She wore an apron, and nothing else. We burned the dessert, ate it anyway, laughing, feeding each other charred sugar. Last Valentine's, 2024, she booked a suite at the Standard High Line. Rose petals spelled, "I still choose you," across the duvet. She'd spent weeks curating a playlist that started with the Postal Service song playing when we first kissed and ended with the Otis Redding track from our wedding dance. She wore lingerie the color of fresh blood. When I told her she was still the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, she cried. Actual tears. That was sunny. Love so large it sometimes embarrassed both of us. Then came 2025. She didn't buy a card. February 13th, we were eating Pad CEW on the kitchen island because the dining table was buried under my client files, branding decks for a tech startup that kept changing their mission statement. I tried to sound casual. So, tomorrow, any grand production in the works? You've been unusually quiet about it. She pushed a piece of broccoli around her plate with chopsticks. Not really. I was thinking we could keep it simple. Pizza, movie, couch. I laughed. Too loud, too brittle. Simple? You don't do simple on Valentine's. Last year you had rose petals delivered by drone. She set the chopsticks down. Her eyes looked bruised, shadows underneath like she'd been crying when I wasn't home. I'm exhausted, okay? Work's been brutal. The new campaign launched 3 weeks late. Client keeps moving goalposts. I don't have it in me to turn tomorrow into a spectacle this time. The words hit, like cold water, poured down my spine. Okay, I said carefully. Pizza's fine, but we're still doing something together, right? You're still my Valentine. She offered the small, polite smile she used on difficult clients, the one that never reached her eyes. Of course. Then she added, almost offhand, I do have to step out for a couple hours in the afternoon, though. A few friends are having a rough year. Divorces, layoffs, bad breakups. I told them I'd drop by with wine, let them vent. I'll be home by 6, 7 at the latest. We can order in and watch whatever you want. I nodded. The thread of unease that had been twisting in my gut since Christmas tightened another notch. Sure. Just, don't let them keep you all night. I miss my over-the-top Valentine. She reached across the island and squeezed my fingers. Her hand felt colder than usual. I promise I'll be back early. The promise felt like tissue paper. Thin, already tearing. February 14th, 2025 arrived gray and raw. Overnight snow had turned to dirty slush by noon. Sunny was up before me, showered, dressed in charcoal jeans and a charcoal sweater. No red lipstick, no lace peeking at the collar, no heart-shaped stud earrings she usually wore on holidays. She kissed my cheek at the door, quick, perfunctory. Love you, she said. See you tonight. Love you too. Have fun with the girls. She left at 11:42 a.m. The house settled into a hush that felt wrong, like the air had been sucked out. By 2 o'clock the silence had teeth. I tried to work, spreadsheets for a branding client, but the numbers swam. My mind kept circling back to her eyes the night before, the way she'd avoided looking at me when she said, "Of course." I texted her at 2:17, How's the support group vibe? No answer. At 3:04. You okay out there? Nothing. Delivered, no read receipt. At 4:22, I couldn't sit still anymore. I grabbed my coat, my keys, and walked out into the wet February air. Prospect Place to Maple Street is 4 short blocks. I passed the playground with rusted swings creaking in the wind, the bodega that sells the best bacon, egg, and cheese in the neighborhood. The guy behind the counter always remembers my order. The halal cart that stays open even when it's snowing, steam rising from the grill like breath. Then the row of narrow 2-family houses with sagging porches and chipped paint. Harlan's Place is the corner one, gray clapboard peeling in long vertical strips like old skin, windows filmed with decades of cigarette smoke and neglect. Harlan had lived there since before we bought our house, widowed at least 15 years, wife died of breast cancer in the early 2000s, no kids, retired from some long-ago Parks Department job nobody remembered the details of, mostly kept to himself. I'd see him out front retrieving his mail in those same denim overalls, bib faded to the color of old bones, straps frayed, one pocket torn at the seam. His lips were perpetually wet, drooling at the corners like he couldn't quite close his mouth. Half his teeth were gone, the rest brown and crooked. When he smiled it looked like something broken trying to imitate joy. I used to wave, he'd grunt. Harmless old man, I thought. Her silver Honda was parked in his driveway, snow dusted the hood, engine cold. She'd been there hours. My pulse hammered in my ears so loud I could barely hear the traffic on Flatbush. I told myself there were innocent explanations. She could be helping him with groceries. He was old, unsteady, fixing a light fixture, checking on him because he was lonely, and she'd always been the kind of person who noticed when someone was fading. But my feet kept moving. Anyway. The living room curtains were half drawn, a 2-inch gap in the side window blinds. I stepped onto the narrow strip of frozen lawn between the sidewalk and the house, boots crunching on ice. I shouldn't have looked. I looked. Sunny was on her knees on the threadbare oriental rug, reds and golds faded to muddy browns. Harlan stood over her in those same filthy overalls, liver-spotted hand tangled in her hair. Her head moved in a slow, practiced rhythm. The sounds came through the single-pane glass, wet, repetitive, obscene. Gluck, gluck, gluck. Her hands rested on the fronts of his thighs, not pushing away, steadying, encouraging. Her fingers curled slightly the way they did when she was focused, when she wanted something to last. I staggered backward, my heel caught the concrete step. I grabbed the porch railing to keep from falling. Bile surged up so fast I barely made it to the tree lawn before I vomited into the slush. Pad CU and coffee and everything I'd been holding inside since Christmas. Then I walked home. 5 blocks, legs wooden, mind looping the same 4 seconds over and over. Gluck, gluck, gluck. She came through the front door at 9:18 p.m. Hall lights snapped on. Honey, I'm back. God, I'm so sorry I'm late. The girls were a disaster. One of them just found out her ex is engaged again. I couldn't leave her sobbing on the couch. I sat in the dark living room, hadn't moved since I got back. The house smelled like cold pizza. I'd ordered anyway, left the box unopened on the counter. She stepped into the doorway, saw me, froze. Everything okay? She asked. Her cheeks were still flushed, hair mussed at the crown where fingers had gripped, lipstick gone. A faint smell clung to her sweater, cigarettes, sweat, something muskier and more intimate. Old man. Decay. I saw your car at Harlan's, I said quietly. The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. She reached for the doorframe to steady herself. It's not. Don't. She started crying. Great. Choking sobs. And slid down the wall until she sat on the hardwood, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to disappear. I didn't go to her. I went upstairs, locked the bedroom door, lay on top of the covers, staring at the ceiling until the streetlights turned the room the color of old bruises. The next 7 days were silent stretched to breaking. She cooked dinners I left untouched. Short ribs, lasagna, the chicken with 40 cloves of garlic she used to make when I was sick, left notes on the fridge I threw away unread, slept on the couch when I wouldn't unlock the bedroom door. Every night I heard her crying through the floorboards, quiet, hopeless sounds that made me hate her and hate myself for still loving her. I replayed every Valentine's, every ritual, searching for the moment it had started to rot. Had I missed signs? Had I been blind? Or had she simply become someone else while I wasn't looking? February 22nd I hired Reyes. He was ex-NYPD, mid-50s, built like a keg with eyes that had seen every variety of human wreckage. We met at a Greasy Spoon diner on Flatbush, Formica tables, coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. I gave him Sonny's schedule, Harlan's address, every date she'd claimed to be with friends over the last decade. I listed them chronologically, voice flat. He didn't blink. How far back do you want me to dig? Everything. He quoted a number that made my savings account flinch. I paid half in cash, 20s and 50s stuffed in an envelope like drug money. 3 weeks later he called. You're gonna want to be sitting down. Same diner, same booth in the back. He laid out a thick manila envelope, photos, bank statements showing small cash withdrawals every 2 weeks like clockwork, a USB drive labeled simply evidence. Timeline begins March 17, 2014, he said. She'd just turned 21 a couple weeks earlier. Her father died February 28th. Official cause myocardial infarction. No autopsy because the family didn't request one. Left her the house on Prospect Place outright. No will contest, no other claimants. Harlan waited until the funeral flowers wilted, then showed up at her door with a manila envelope containing 6 photographs. He slid over the blown-up print. A little girl, 7 years old, stood frozen in the backyard while a man dug a hole with a shovel. Another man lay face down in the grass, dark pool spreading under his head like spilled ink. Your father-in-law, Reyes said, July 12, 1999, drunk argument with a neighbor over a property line fence. One punch landed wrong, skull fracture, subdural hematoma. He died before the ambulance arrived. Dad panicked. Buried the body that night in the backyard under 6 inches of topsoil and sod. Harlan was up in his treehouse 30 yards away with an old Canon Sure Shot. 6 frames. Kept them quiet for 25 years. Waited until the old man was dead and the daughter inherited the property. Then he made his move. I stared at the child in the photo. Sonny. My Sonny. Small hands clenched at her sides, eyes wide with something that looked like understanding too early. Her hair in pigtails, a sundress, bare feet in summer grass. She told him to go duck himself at first. Reyes continued. He said he'd mail copies to every precinct in Brooklyn, every local paper, every living relative still breathing. Said her dad would go from devoted single father who raised his daughter alone after his wife died, to convicted murderer overnight. Funeral canceled. Grave desecrated. Her whole childhood rewritten as accessory after the fact. She caved. How long? My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. 12 years, 3 months. Started sporadic, once every few months when he'd call with a reminder. Became more frequent after you two bought the house together in 2018. She was paying rent to live in her own property essentially. He'd text. She'd go. Sometimes 3, 4 times a week the last 2 years. Pattern holds on holidays, especially Valentine's. She'd tell you she was visiting friends. She was 4 blocks away. I felt the booth tilt under me. The coffee I'd sipped turned to acid in my stomach. Valentine's, I repeated, every year except the first 2 you were married. She spent them with him, usually afternoon into evening. She'd come home late, smelling like smoke and lies. I paid him for more. Video if he could get it. Audio, timestamps, geotags, anything that couldn't be explained away as coercion. I needed proof. I needed to know if she was victim or collaborator. Sonny kept trying to repair the damage. She bought flowers, peonies, my favorite, $28 a bunch from the florist on Vanderbilt. Cooked short ribs with the red wine reduction she knew I loved. One night in March, she slipped into the bedroom after I'd fallen asleep, crawled under the covers, pressed her body against mine. Her skin felt foreign. I'll stop, she whispered into my neck. I swear on everything. I'll never see him again. Please let me fix this. I love you. I've always loved you. I let her think the only crime was an affair. I didn't mention the body yet. I wanted to see how far the lie would stretch. April 5th, a Saturday. I came home early from a client site visit in Dumbo. She was in the kitchen on the phone, back to the doorway, voice low and trembling. Can't keep disappearing like this, Isao. She saw the devil want to subside. She's wise as dome. already asking questions. If I keep coming over every few days, he's going to follow me one day. I know he is. Long pause. I know what you'll do. You've said it enough times, but Valentine's was different. I couldn't miss it with him again. He looked at me like I'd forgotten who he was, like I'd stopped loving him. Another pause. Her voice cracked. Please, don't call the police about the backyard. It would destroy him. It would destroy everything we built. I stepped into the room. She spun. The phone slipped from her fingers and clattered on the tile. We stared at each other for what felt like hours. How long? I asked. Tears came instantly. Since right after Dad died. I was 18, almost 19. Harlan showed up the day after the funeral with that envelope, showed me the pictures, said he'd been watching me since I was a kid, growing up so pretty, he said. Said if I didn't do what he wanted, he'd ruin Dad's name, ruin mine, send the photos everywhere. I thought I could contain it, keep it away from you, keep us safe. You let that disgusting old man duck you for 12 years because of bones in our backyard. She dropped to her knees. I didn't want to lose you. I thought if I gave him what he asked for, it would stay over there, never touch us. I thought I was protecting us. I pulled the divorce papers from my messenger bag. I'd had them drawn 2 weeks earlier by a lawyer who owed me a favor. Sign. She sobbed so hard the pen shook. Ink smeared across her name like blood. I left the papers on the counter and walked out. April 8th. I went to Harlan's alone. Well, neighbor, come to borrow a— Now hold on. You blackmailed my wife for over a decade. You used a little girl's worst memory to get your prick sucked. You turned her into your private whore while I slept 4 blocks away. You're done. She started wanting it, eventually. Got real good at it. Enthusiastic even. Reyes. Got video. Last 8 months. Hidden cam in the living room. Cheap nanny cam disguised as a smoke detector. She knows where it is now. She's not being coerced anymore. She's directing traffic. Narrator. He sent a secure link. I opened it in a hotel room in Long Island City I'd rented under a friend's name. Neutral ground. No memories. On-screen Sunny. Video. Like that. Harder. The way I like. Gluck, 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 gluck. The divorce hearing was June 27, 2025. Video. On screen. You like when I do that? Audio in court. Gluck, 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 gluck. Sunny. In court. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It's not my fault. My body. It got used to it. The things he made me do. They became normal. I didn't know how to stop. Please, please forgive me. Narrator. In court. I have nothing else. Sunny moved to a 1-bedroom in Beacon, up the Hudson, small town, quiet streets, views of the river. She called for months, voicemails that started desperate, turned pleading, eventually quiet. I stopped drinking, one said in October, started trauma therapy, EMDR, real work. I know I destroyed us. I just want you to know I'm trying to become someone you wouldn't hate. I never called back. Harlan got a knock on his door in September. Anonymous tip, someone mailed a thumb drive with the old photos to the 78th precinct. Police arrived with warrants and cadaver dogs, dug up the backyard on a Tuesday morning under a sky the color of wet concrete, found skeletal remains wrapped in decayed blue tarp. Dental records matched a missing persons report from July 1999, 47-year-old man, last seen arguing with a neighbor over fence posts. Cause of death, blunt force trauma to the skull. Harlan's in Rikers now. Pretrial detention. Murder, 2nd degree. Blackmail. Sexual abuse charges stacking like bricks. I don't know if Sunny visits him. I don't ask. I live in a small 1-bedroom in Greenpoint. No yard, no holidays, no Valentines. I work freelance from a folding table by the window. I walk the neighborhood at night when I can't sleep, past Polish delis closing up, past bars spilling laughter, past couples holding hands like they still believe in forever. Some nights I still wake up to the echo. Gluck, gluck, gluck. It never quite stops. I walk past the old house sometimes. The new owners put up solar lights along the walkway, planted lavender where the hole used to be. They have a toddler now, red coat, yellow boots, chasing bubbles in the summer. They look happy. I don't stop to talk. I just keep driving.